While the Treasurer may have some surprises, he's not pretending the budget will be popular. According to the leaks, he's going to rob the rich, slash private health insurance rebates and cut superannuation perks to pay for a $30 a week pension rise. Independent Senator Nick Xenophon may well determine if this budget is passed, and he joins us now from Adelaide. Senator Xenophon, thanks so much and welcome to Sunday Agenda.
Good morning, Helen.
Now, if we can start on the budget leaks first, the good news is that working mothers will get an 18 weeks paid maternity leave to begin January 2011. But the bad news, according to Fairfax Papers, is that many single parents, mostly women, will not get the pension rises on Tuesday. Now, you said yesterday it would create a society of haves and have-nots.
Well, that's right. Firstly, in relation to the paid maternity leave, all credit to campaigners such as Natasha Stott-Despoja, a former senator from South Australia, that pushed very hard on this issue for many years, and I think it's finally come to fruition. It's overdue. It's a good thing. But it doesn't make sense to me for the government to be giving long overdue increases to senior citizens in terms of pensions, but that sole parents, single mums in particular, will miss out. The last time I checked, they still have to pay just as much as everybody else at the checkout for the basic essentials of life, and I think there's an anomaly there.
Why do you think they've done that?
Well, you have to ask the government. I think that there will be a backlash, and it's something that I hope between now and Tuesday night the Treasurer reconsiders.
OK, what about the paid maternity leave scheme? I know it's been lobbied for a long time, including by the Sex Discrimination Commissioner. Now, can we afford it right now?
Well, I think it's a question of can we afford not to do it right now? And I think that when you consider the social benefit in giving mums paid maternity leave, I think it's the right thing to do. It's overdue. We're behind a number of other countries in the OECD in terms of this, and I think that it'll pay dividends in terms of a social dividend with respect to the benefit it'll have on those kids that can have their mums staying home with them longer. And I think it's a good thing to do right now, irrespective of the fact that things are relatively tough.
All right, well, if you think it's a good thing to do right now, will you be pushing for it to be brought forward? January 2011, there's still a lot of babies to be born between now and then.
That's right. Well, look, I want to see what the figures are in terms of what it will cost. I think the fact that we now have a start date is very encouraging, and it will represent a very significant change in terms of, as a society where paid maternity leave hasn't been part of any government policy. I think that this is very encouraging, so I'd like to see what the figures are. January 2011 is it's a good start, but let's see whether it can be pushed forward a little.
OK. The slashing of the rebate on private health insurance, which will hurt middle-income earners as well as the rich. Now, that seems to have prompted the most howls of protest so far. What's your verdict at this stage?
Well, I'm like one of 11 million Australians that has private health insurance, and I think we've got it pretty right here in this country in terms of the balance between the public and private systems. We need to have the two systems coexisting, working well together. The concern is that if the government goes ahead with this plan, the effect will be not only to slug those in the middle and upper income earners, but it could have the effect of people dropping out of private health insurance. The consequence of that is that you'll have fewer policyholders, and you'll see private health insurance premiums skyrocket, and we could well see a downward spiral. Look, the other thing, Helen, is that in the context of the Medicare threshold debate, one of the issues I managed to get up in terms of the negotiations with the Health Minister, Nicola Roxon, was to have a Productivity Commission inquiry for the first time on the mix between the public and private health systems, because we want to see where we get our best bang for our buck, to put it colloquially, in terms of where money can best be spent in the health system. Now, the Productivity Commission hasn't commenced that inquiry, as I understand it. They're due to report on it towards the end of this year. I would have thought the government should wait until that inquiry by an independent body, such as the Productivity Commission, has released its findings.
So as part of your argy-bargy, no doubt, that will go on after Tuesday, will you be saying put the brakes on the slashing of that rebate?
Look, I have very real concerns about it, and let's look at the bigger picture. At the last election, Australians went to the polls with both major parties promising in explicit terms that the rebate would not be touched. It was a promise made by the then government, by the then opposition led by Kevin Rudd, a very explicit promise. It wasn't on the agenda, and I would have thought that this is a very significant breach of trust for an issue that is so important to so many Australians.
So do we take that as that you won't be supporting something that was an election pledge by Kevin Rudd being broken?
I think you'll take it that I'm nowhere near convinced that this is the right thing to do, and I just can't see how that there are any compelling reasons to support this policy in the context of the promise, in the context of the impact on private health insurance premiums for those that stay in the system, and also in the context of the government instigating a Productivity Commission inquiry to look at this very mix of the way monies are spent in both the public and private systems.
On the other hand, do you support the promised tax cuts going ahead? People earning $180,000 plus get the most benefit this time round. Now, right at this time again, could they have been put off?
Well, I think that's one of the arguments made by a number of economists, and in fact the polling I've seen is that a lot of Australians are saying, well look, times are tough, we could maybe put this off. That's something that the government has ruled out. I know we're in tough times, but I think it's important that whatever budget measures are being proposed, that they don't have a whole range of unintended consequences, that they don't make the situation worse. And I would have thought that in terms of the private health insurance backflip on the part of the government, that will make matters much worse and put more strain on an already strained public health system.
But if you in the Senate reject some of the cuts in the budget, which would save the government money, does that mean that pensioners will miss out on getting their promised rise?
I think what it means is that there will be a lot of argy-barging in the Senate, not just with me but with my crossbench colleagues, and that's assuming of course that the opposition takes the view that it doesn't support certain measures, and that's when of course the 7 crossbenchers come into play, because the sheer arithmetic of it is that if one of the crossbenchers supports the 37 coalition senators, the legislation is blocked, but the government needs all 7 crossbenchers to get its legislation through.
What do you think of cutting the amount of tax-free money that high-income earners can put into their super to pay for a rise in the pension?
Look, in relation to that, I think there's a concern that that went too far, that that there's a real argument for reining in those upper limits, that it was seen not so much as an avoidance mechanism, but it was seen as something that was quite open only to a select few in the community, and it was costing a lot of money. I think there are some arguments there for the government to pare that back.
Okay, so do you support the government's general moves towards means testing various benefits?
It depends on the benefits and it depends on the consequences of those policies. Again, going back to private health insurance, I don't want to see that equilibrium between the public and private systems being thrown out of kilter, and I think there's a real risk of that happening in the context of what the government appears to be proposing. If you have 1 million or 2 million Australians jumping out of the private health system, that will mean that the rest of those that stay in will end up paying more, and the consequence of that you'll see more people on the public system, more people jumping out of private health insurance and increasing those premiums, and I think that's a pretty risky strategy on the part of the government.
The latest leaks suggest the budget will forecast an increased unemployment rate of 8.5%. Now, the opposition has been saying jobs, jobs, jobs. That seems a much better proposition now, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's important that any infrastructure spending that is announced in the budget is very much in relation to, very much focused on job creation, on building the nation's productive economy. And when you consider that the Reserve Bank, as recently as a couple of days ago, was forecasting that the worst, that there's some light at the end of the tunnel, that we could be coming out of this recession as early as the middle of this year, albeit in a fairly patchy manner, but that's encouraging, even though the recovery may well be quite shallow for a number of months. I think the fact that we could be seeing the worst could well be over in the next 2 or 3 months is something that we need to plan for, so that when the economy does pick up, we can make sure that we can harness that productive capacity by ensuring that we've got the best possible infrastructure in place.
Do you support the first home buyers grant perhaps being extended on Tuesday night, say for new homes, which might boost construction and give a further boost to the economy?
Look, it clearly has given a boost for the construction industry, and I think they've been given another shot in the arm in relation to the infrastructure fund for school buildings. Look, I think that the danger is that if you stop the first homeowners grant suddenly, that there will be a shock to the system, that any change ought to be gradual, that it ought to be phased down, and I would hope that the government is going down that path, even though a number of economic commentators are concerned about the long-term implications of the first homeowners grant in terms of its inflationary effect on house prices. But if you just take that away immediately, and I know the PM has said all good things must come to an end, I think it's how it comes to an end that's important. So I think it's, in terms of good policy, not having a shock to the system, a phased reduction of the first homeowners grant would make more sense than an abrupt closing off the scheme.
Well, let's have a look at another couple of issues aside from the budget. You have a campaign or two of your own at the moment. You're opposed to Chinalco's proposed deal with Rio Tinto, and you and Barnaby Joyce have made an anti-Chinalco commercial. Let's look at an excerpt of your ad before I ask you about it.
Despite my name, I'm certainly not xenophobic. Foreign investment has brought enormous benefits to Australia, but sometimes it's important to say no to a deal that's lousy for our country. The proposed purchase by Chinalco, a Chinese government-owned company, of Rio Tinto's strategic mineral assets is not in our national interest. To have an arm of the Chinese government controlling key Australian resources, and with it the prices of those resources, just doesn't make sense. You sell the milk, not the cow, and we should be selling the minerals, not the mine. Let's not gamble with Australia's future.
Senator Xenophon, you've called it a lousy deal. You've argued very strongly that it's not in Australia's interest. Now, Chinalco will get 18% and 2 of a number of board seats, but they don't control the mines. Why is that against the national interest?
Well, 18% is a very significant stakeholding, and once they've got that 18%, I think it's only a short further step to have effective control. They will have a significant role on the board. They'll have seats on the board, and when you consider that this is not an ordinary takeover, I'm not against foreign investment, but what I am against is having a company that's the arm of a foreign government having a key role in our strategic resources. It can control, it can influence and control the price of those resources. I think would be mugs for that deal to go ahead. And when you look at the criteria that Treasurer Swan enunciated a number of months ago about what the sort of things that you need to look at in the context of approving a foreign takeover deal, in terms of the impact that would have on the economy, the impact it would have on a particular resource, I would have thought on Wayne Swan's own criteria and own concerns that he ought to reject this deal.
Now, what sort of reaction have you had? You've only been running it since last night.
None yet, but I'm sure there'll be a few emails and voice messages on the phone this morning when I check at the office.
All right, just briefly, will you be supporting the Alco-Pops legislation when the government introduces it again in Parliament? You supported the bill the first time round and called on the Family First Senator Steve Fielding not to block it again. What would you say to him this time?
Well, look, I hope Steve can reconsider. Steve has a number of very considered and passionate concerns about the whole issue of alcohol and sports advertising. I understand those concerns. I think that a number of concessions have been given by the government to both myself and the Greens in terms of alcohol education, vetting of advertising, having an extra $50 million on a number of very important community projects to rein back binge drinking, and I think Steve could make a significant contribution there as well. So I hope he reconsiders, because I think it's important to get that legislation through.
Nick Xenophon, we'll leave it there. Hopefully we'll speak to you again sometime after the budget. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Helen.
This is Sky News. Twitter is enhancing the way we share ideas and information and bringing you up-to-the-minute news and views. Sky News is part of the global conversation. To share your opinion about the stories making headlines and for news as it breaks, go to twitter.com/Sky News AUST.